Yeah, hearing no changes to the agenda brings us to public comment. I don't see anyone here nor online, so I think we can move right to reviewing the draft of the UPWP request that Larry has prepared for us.
A few hard copies here if anybody wants them. And we'll bring them on the screen as well.
Yeah. This guy? That's the green. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you guys want these? What is that? What are we doing?
This grant thing?
I got the green.
I guess I have a question before we start about this.
Yes.
So in 2024, they studied what did they study then? I remember this, but I don't remember what it was we were studying.
Well, yeah, I'm not familiar with the whole history of the town's recent UPWP requests, but I know that we did get we got funding to do a study of sidewalks going into and leaving this village from to that road. I think it was Sand Hill Road through the village and then out to Underhill Central School.
Yeah.
And so that study was done as ordered up, and it produced some recommendations which were backed by the town recreation committee. And none of that's been built, of course. You didn't know that if it was built.
Right.
But it did have scoping for that path. A lot of it was alongside like a shoulder of the road, River Road and Pleasant Valley Road. And then some of it was diverged a little bit from the road where it couldn't follow the road exactly, where it was unsafe to follow the road. And it basically said it could be done, and here are some funding sources that could be applied for, and that's where it sits.
So that's where it sits. So whose responsibility is to move forward with that?
I think it would be somebody has to take the initiative. You know, it could be the select board saying, let's do this, and applying for some of the grant funding. I don't know if there are other pathways to initiate it. It could be initiated by the planning commission, but in any event, it requires extensive funding to build it. So, you know, it's just like many things in town government. A lot of people agree it's a good idea. Somebody's got to pick up the ball and run with it in order for things to start happening. And, you know, there is still funding for those types of improvements available at the state level and through federal grants. So, you know, there's less than there used to be, but it's still there, but it just hasn't been applied for. And typically it's, I would say probably a 2 to 3 year process once the town says go to apply for the funds and to have the funds be approved and be queued up in the transportation program to actually build that.
So it's just kind of stalled, basically. Nobody's taking initiative. The select board is not put any emphasis into it.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we just got done building sidewalks in the flats, right?
Right.
And so, you know, in a small town like this, I think people have limited bandwidth and attention span, whatever. So now that that's behind us, I think it's appropriate to raise this. And this proposal, this new proposal, is a much bigger deal, which is why I think it's helpful for us to start the conversation now.
Right.
Because that probably might be more like a 3 or 4 year time frame if people like it and if RPC decides they want to work with us on that. Because, you know, that's not just reconfiguring whatever third of a mile. It's whatever it is, 6 miles between the two villages that would have to be redone. And there was, I found this out this week, too late to put anything on the agenda about it, but there was a study done, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago by regional planning or funded by regional planning that actually looked at the road bed for the whole length of River Road between the flats and the center village. And I haven't really had time to dive into that, but basically they said that, you know, the road is in good shape and it can be strengthened and widened as needed. And there would be some places that would require more work than others. But in general, the roadbed is solid and the pavement is in pretty good condition. And you know, it would be a good step to sort of proceed with, you know, if we were going to rebuild it, why and for what purposes. And so that's what this project would address. Widening to add a shoulder and maybe even extend it a little bit more. So it's not just a narrow shoulder, but a wider shoulder like you find in places that have, you know, safe biking, like parts of Route 15 through Cambridge, for example.
Yeah.
So we don't have an, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, the 2024 study started that, at least out a stretch of River Road to Sand Hill.
Yeah, on either side of the center.
Okay.
Yeah. And the idea behind that was just to at least provide access within the general vicinity of the village, especially for kids going to school,
Right.
because that seemed like the most critical and immediate need.
Is there any reason that someone would oppose this?
I don't think so, but maybe I'm naive or just inexperienced in the town.
I mean, you always have people because they don't know where it's fun. Like I remember seeing a lot of complaints about the sidewalks in the flats
The same,
because they're like, oh, our tax dollars. Like, no, that was all grant money. So
yeah.
it was really $0 out of your pocket.
Yeah.
But people don't understand that, so they're going
Right.
to complain.
So we don't have an amount on what we're applying for. They determine the amount, the CC.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I have no idea what it would cost at this moment.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are several stages when you're proposing a transportation project. And this is really a proposal just for the first stage, which is scoping to investigate, you know, what would be involved to do this work, what kinds of engineering, right-of-way acquisition, construction costs. And there are much wiser heads at RPC who work on this stuff every day. And, you know, if they think this is a good idea and they want to support it, I'm pretty sure that they can fill in those numbers, you know, because they can tell you, oh, a scoping study for a multi-use path or a widening will cost between X amount and Y amount. And then that can be plugged in to the dollar figure. And I'm pretty sure there's some kind of town match that would be required at some point. But I don't know what that would be. I mean, typically with transportation projects, it's a 20% match as the baseline, but it could be that 20% match could be paid through other funding, like state and federal grants.
So this, I'm glad you added, you know, a marked shoulder.
Yes.
You know, that might be really what's feasible.
Yes.
Because the, you know, putting in a whole path, basically, it's gonna get into telephone poles and
Yes.
everything else, basically. So,
Yeah, that's maybe where
And this
people
is-
would come against it if it was a
yeah,
little more.
right, but a
yeah,
marked
of
shoulder
bigger
would be a
footprint.
huge improvement.
This is considered a transportation project?
Yes.
Okay.
So is it federal funds or, to build something like this, or state funds, or
I
combination?
think it's a combination typically when they get built. Yeah.
What were estimates that were solicited for the first proposal?
For the one that was completed in 2024?
Yeah.
Yes. I just didn't have enough time to fully research for it. But,
Yeah, okay.
but again, this is a bigger scope. It's different. It's mostly different. I mean, there's overlap. So from the entrance into the village, from the flat side, from that road intersection, Sand Hill Road into the village, that part's been scoped already. But everything from Sand Hill Road intersection all the way back to the flats, to the cemetery, I guess, would be where you would go. That has not been estimated in terms of what would be required.
I wonder if we ought to emphasize the marked shoulder. That's the one that seems feasible, you know, because I don't know if the other is, you know, people look at it and say, oh, it's possible.
Yeah.
You know, but if we emphasize that marked shoulder, it won't, they won't look at it and get scared away right away.
Yeah. It's definitely probably easier to tackle because I mean, I don't know what the right of way is for River Road, but like, adding a 10-foot shoulder is probably still within that limits.
Mhm.
So you don't have to do all the easement.
Do you know what the right of way would be? Or is that a two
Probably
rod
3
road?
rod, but I don't know.
50 feet,
I don't know if it's a
49.
two rod road or a three. I think
Must
it
be
may be a
three.
two. I don't know.
Most town roads
I've
are
heard-
3 rod.
I know, yeah, but I've heard other ones.
What's a 3
Possibility.
49
50 feet.
That's total or half? It's like
Total.
20
Total.
Total. That's not much, man.
There are a few houses that are quite close to the road,
Right.
between the center and the flats too, where it's like, and I think our conversation, last meeting, you said maybe there's like places where it would have to be a path that would have to go.
Around the houses.
And
yeah.
that feels more complicated, and that feels like where it would get into Jen's question about, are people gonna, that's more of a footprint and more of a undertaking. But if there is the space within the right of way, then the shoulder seems like the way
Mhm.
to go and the thing to emphasize for sure. I don't know that I had any other specific changes in the draft, but did anyone else notice anything glaring that we should have in there that isn't in there currently?
I assume the bullet points are like things that you're required to address from their like checklist or outline, right, Larry?
Yes.
Like your italic.
Yeah, it follows directly from their outline, and the stuff that's in a slightly different font, a little darker, is the draft of my answers. And so the questions I think are in italics in each section, and then the darker font are my answers. And I mean, I feel like conceptually, it's a logical continuation of the thinking that went into the 2024 study. And also it is very consistent. If you go to page 2, they ask you to cite what elements or goals within the regional plan would this project be consistent with, and then what aspects of your town plan would this project be consistent with. And I feel like that's all pretty strong. The town plan definitely calls for more developed pedestrian and cycling infrastructure in town. And this is, I think, to me, without, again, knowing more about the history of the town or where accidents occur, it seems to me that this is probably like the main stem, arguably, for the town to like the two villages. And it's a logical place to make these kinds of improvements. There probably are other places in town where you could have a multi-use path, but I think this is the one that's potentially the highest value because it would get the most use for a long distance run. There's always going to be, and if you think about if you've used any of the paths that the city of South Burlington constructed, there's a lot of different kinds of paths there. There's some paths that follow main stem roads like Spear Street and Dorset Street. Dorset Street, the one that is mostly separated. The one on Spear Street is right on the roadway. And then there's these little chunks of paths that like connect some of those highlights through neighborhoods and out to the park that they have there near the intersection of Swift and Dorset Street. And, I think a proposal like this, which is intended to provide linkage to existing cyclable trails and roadways is going to have a stronger base for support than something which is a little chunk that, just connects things that don't connect to other things.
Yeah, right.
People are talking about the hazard there, about the dangers, driving along there, 7:30 in the morning, traffic going both ways, basically. Idiot pedestrians running in the face of the traffic.
Yes.
Bank of snow on one side, a narrow path that they're running in this slippery slush while a car is passing 1.5 feet from them, basically. People are talking about that kind of a thing.
Right.
So,
And state law was changed a few years ago to require vehicles to maintain a 4-foot passing distance for bicycles. And I don't know how you do that in the circumstance you just described. You don't have 4 feet.
no,
These
these are idiot runners, basically, idiot joggers. Yeah.
Well, maybe there are a couple of things with those comments in mind that we want to emphasize a little more before you finalize this and submit it, Larry? And maybe clarifying about what the right of way is for River Road, because that I think would make it stronger if we could say, hey, there is adequate space already that a marked shoulder could be added within the confines of what's already allowable there. Is there something else? Yeah, and the underlining the safety aspects. I think you've done that well already, though, in here. The town plan does speak specifically to River Road too. That's great. But yeah, I think that sounds good to me. I think everybody's on board with this, right? Is there any other kinds of comments or anything else? Like, does that feel like give you a couple of things maybe to tweak? That you could go. I know this is on the agenda with the select board maybe
Tomorrow night.
So you're gonna make sure that they're okay with their percentage of matching funds if we get it? Or is that?
I think Brad will explain that. It's on their agenda, and in both for us and for the select board, it doesn't require a formal vote to endorse this. But, the RPC wants to know before you hand in the proposal that it's been discussed and that members of the planning commission and the select board are aware of it.
Yeah.
And, there is a requirement for the select board to have like a publicly warned discussion before the end of March this year for this project to go forward if RPC likes it. But, they got a couple months to schedule that. I think it's great that it initiate with us because, we're supposed to hold the big picture of what the town needs going forward and kind of what's missing and what's important. So, the fact that we talked about it and that people understand it and generally think it's a good idea is a great starting point for the town. And I hope, Roy, that you will ask that where the question you started off with, like, whatever happened with
the
2024 study and what's it going to take to get the town moving on that, even if it takes a while to collect the funding to make that happen. Because, I think people in general, to Jeff's point, I think people may tend to be a little skeptical when they see construction starting, like who's really going to use this? But if there's more of it and if it meets an obvious need, I think the public will come around to support it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's twofold, right? Like, there's definitely a problem. Like, people are, pedestrians, bikers, jog, whatever, are using that corridor between village centers. Like, if you drive it, you realize that, right? I've seen it plenty of times and had to swerve out of the way. But there's also people that are probably deterred from doing certain extracurriculars because it's unsafe. Whereas if you have the path, like, you might actually get people out that wanted to get out, to get out. I guess the only other concern financially would be somebody, I'm sure, would raise it is like, well, what's it going to cost to plow that in the winter, right? Like, that's an extra city cost to maintain it now, right? So I guess you got to tackle that potential kickback.
I mean, if it's on a shoulder,
it's a shoulder, it's just a town plow. So there's no expense there.
Yeah, something like the Stowe bike path. I was at the planning board for that, where it's going through like what was a lot of private land, and there's that sort of, you have eminent domain to take that, or
probably
volunteer.
Yeah, I mean, often with those the longer paths, the longer multi-use paths, they pursue easements that are donated.
Right.
But if they can't get the easements that they need to carry out the plan, then, there's the eminent domain is an option.
Right.
But, with this type of approach on to the shoulder location, the widened shoulders, and that's town land, it's, we already have the right of way. So that's not going to be an issue.
It's unfortunate that we wouldn't have an option to do something like that because it's such an amazing resource for the community to have an independent trail like that. I think that so many people, like, are people going down the road with their kids in the carriage on the road with no shoulder, and
Yes.
People running and biking and just the use of this path like Stowe gets is pretty phenomenal. We're just going to draw people to it.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty remarkable to have something like that.
Yeah. I mean, the Stowe path was a multi-million-dollar,
Yeah.
multi-year
Yeah,
project. And it required a lot of leadership and a lot of meetings and a lot of grant applications. And, you know, this is really like step one of probably 14 steps for this project.
Right.
So,
That's probably even like the Colchester Trail, like all the way from, Miles Bay up into the rail trail, or not the rail trail, but the
Causeway.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I know my wife personally complains, like, she's like, I'd love to get out and walk if there was like a paved walkway to do it on. It's like, she doesn't want to walk in the mud and slush and slip on a dirt road in the middle of winter. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you're looking at developing, adding development to either side of the path, and I'm sure other towns probably get some funds from the developers to help pay for that as well.
Yeah.
Is this a moment that we need to act on this with a motion, or is it more just this discussion is good and gives you enough, or should we move that to proceed with the grant application as prepared?
I mean, I'm ready to submit it,
Yeah.
with just a short cover note saying that we talked about it tonight.
Yeah.
And
Maybe that's all.
the group endorses that going forward with it. And
Yeah.
I don't think we need anything more formal than that.
Okay. Yeah, does that sound good, everyone?
Yeah.
Good. Cool. All right, great. Well, yeah, we are moving a little bit behind, but I think that the work plan discussion will be a little quicker. I think it's this one for this, just to lay out kind of the schedule for. Yeah, Tim, or you want me to?
Yes, we're good on that.
so you got one of those already?
Yeah, and yeah, Larry's taken some of the topics that we talked about at last meeting and laid them out to kind of keep us busy here through the March meetings. So yeah, Larry, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, as Sadiq just pointed out, we did sort of talk about this in loose terms. And what I tried to do here was just slot in 2 topics for each meeting and then insert the references that we're going to be looking at, which sections we'd be modifying. So we're all set to meet the plan for tonight. And then at our next meeting, we have the public hearing on the proposed amendments that's been duly warned as per statute. And then David wanted to get us to a discussion about residential density, particularly starting with the villages, but also thinking more broadly about, the whole interplay between maximum density and maximum minimum lot sizes. Yeah, because I think we did touch on that earlier this winter, but we kind of got to a certain point and then we just said, well, this is complicated. Let's come back to this. And so, my job will be to maybe play that out a little bit more and draft and refine the language that we talked about the first time and, with some clear options.
Brad, I talked with Brad today a little bit, and he was talking about the density issue down in this particular district, the Underhill Center, and he printed this out, and it's showing how half-acre zoning would not work in this area here. That you end up, this is, these perimeters are around the septic areas and around the water areas. And you end up with, the amount of land that's covered there, that's almost 1.5 acres in this area. And in this one here, there are 2 acres actually.
Those are well
overlapped. Yeah, there's well and there's septic basically.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is something that we could probably look at a little more closely. And he thinks that, half-acre zoning in this area just is not possible. If we get a municipal system,
Yes.
then yes, but at present, not at all.
Right. And
So,
that's just a kind of a 2 or 3 lot snapshot.
right.
It's not the whole village. And,
Right.
you know, the overlapping required areas around wastewater leach fields, which are called septic shields, and the overlapping fields for around well heads. Those are more of an issue in some places than others in town. It's probably less of an issue in the more rural parts of town because it's more land. But, you know, it is a fact of life and a limit on development in terms of how these things work with state septic rules, because, you know, the state will tell you if you apply for a new septic permit or a replacement septic permit, if somebody happened to put in a well 75 feet or 50 feet from where you want to locate your leach field, you're out of luck. You can't do it because of the rules, how the rules work. But that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody 2 lots over from you, it just happens to be the roll of the dice and what's located already for leach fields and for wellheads. And, you know, the septic rules do change over time, but what as David was pointing out on that map is the way things are now for well shields and for septic shields. They do overlap, and, you know, it's a complicated picture, way above my pay grade, to be honest. Jeff knows more about this stuff than I do.
Yeah, but it's not just half acre, you know, it's just.
That's how I was saying, like, I'm surprised you can fit any of that in under an acre, like I said, out. Again, most of my experience out west, but, you know, the Maricopa County, 5 million plus people there, like, it's pretty much standard, like, you know, unless you have, again, a municipal or an on-site, you know, wastewater treatment system that everything's going to, if you're gonna have literally like well and private septic per lot, 1 acre is the minimum you can go, because just based on, you know, wells, you know, protecting the well from discharge from your septic, right? Like, you don't want your septic leaching into your, you know, water supply. And then at the same time, your septic has to dispose of certain, you know, chemicals and byproducts within a certain amount of landmass. And like, you do the math, by the time you put a house in with lot coverage, a well, a septic, you're pretty much at an acre without becoming close to, you know, negatively impacting one or the other.
Yeah. He did say
The other thing is that, you know, the water table in this area is about 3 feet, basically.
yes.
And that house that's just opposite the post office box has a flooded cellar, typically, you know, all the time.
All the time.
So,
The new house?
yeah, opposite the post office.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Should have been a slab.
Yeah.
Right.
Surprised they even tried to put a basement in
Well, we will.
It's a cistern now.
there. Yeah. That's right.
Brad did say that a lot of the issues that are highlighted on that map in terms of overlapping exclusion areas would go away somewhat if the Underhill Center Village was able to develop a community wastewater system. I'm sorry, community water system.
Right.
Right.
And then the other thing he said that was really interesting, just a historical tidbit, is that there at one time Underhill Center Village had a community water system.
Wonder what that was like.
Probably some spring up on the mountain.
Yeah, right.
How far?
Flavor goes off once in a while.
There's an aqueduct.
Yeah, it was the milk pond. It was the milk pond.
Yeah.
Now this particular thing was a subdivision up on the Krug Road, and so
Yeah.
it was the
That's still with
John Connell's property.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
It's a good discussion, but yeah,
this is for you, I guess.
You can put it back where it was.
we're gonna move to a more in-depth discussion of this too as part of the work plan at our next meeting after the public hearing. But I'm glad that we're taking this up, and there's definitely a lot more to dig into it about.
Yeah.
But yeah, that will be on the 5th after the public hearing. And then, as you can see, we moved through some of the other topics that we discussed yesterday. So the natural resource protections, does that include the mapping that we talked about too, or is that I meant to ask you about that as well?
I think where we landed
That's
on
going to be
those.
later.
Yeah, we're going to do mapping later. I think where
Yeah.
we landed on natural resource protections is that there was a couple of things that were called out in the natural resource inventory that seemed like they had potentially an impact on subdivision standards. And we should specifically make sure that the subdivision standards spell out that you have to look at wildlife corridors and forest blocks and try to design where houses will go around those and not put, house in the middle of a big forest block at the end of a long driveway. Because that's the kind of thing that, the state wants to discourage. And I think we recognize that if we're going to be serious about protecting intact forests, especially older growth forests that have a lot of ecological values, we don't want people cutting driveways through the midst of them and putting houses at the end of them. So, I did actually check the subdivision standards, and they do mention that, but we'll look to see if we think that those existing protections are adequate or if they need to be strengthened a bit.
We'll get into that discussion eventually.
Yes.
The official zoning map, I was talking with Brad, and I thought the official zoning map was the one that has the individual properties on it. That is not the official zoning map. It's the one that's interior before that, actually. And the ones with the properties, delineations were hand-drawn on top of the official map, which is, I don't know whether that piece of paper over on the shelf there is something that Brad made, but I asked him to make one up of with the individual properties, just so that I could take a look at that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is that?
I have the current official zoning map up on the bulletin board next to my desk there, and it's the same one we're all familiar with. It looks like it was drawn in the 1950s.
Yeah,
And
70s, yeah.
Okay, and it's distance-based rather than properties. Now, it does overlay the lines defining the different zoning districts on our current map.
Right.
Do overlay, if you took bring up the town map viewer, I think you could bring up how the zoning district lines overlay properties. So it wouldn't be hard to print that out, in other words, if you hadn't done that yet.
So I'd like to get into a little bit of a discussion about the feasibility of even doing this.
Yes.
The problems will be the big parcels of land where the boundaries run through them and how to deal with those and if there's some way and so on. So that would be part of a feasibility, whether we should even get into this whole thing or not. So I'd like to get into that along the way here somewhere.
Yeah, well, I only scoped out through the end of March. And I think, come warmer weather and a little more time to think about how to approach that task.
Right.
I think we'll have make a plan and begin to think through the steps. And, some of it will be mapping and, we have this huge format printer over there, which we can use to, print out very large format maps with the property lines on them. And then, we can get the printout, put it on the table and all huddle around it and say, oh, this doesn't make sense. This line should move, or why does the district boundary line over there, if what we're really trying to do is this other thing, because I think part of it is that we need to ask what policy goals are being accomplished by having the lines where they are, right? That's ultimately the important part, because the regulatory. The application of regulation should follow from policy goals. And
I think we can do this all without creating a major uproar in town.
I mean, it depends if the changes are global or if they're just tweaking places where it's problematic. I feel like, part of it might be that we want to put out a call to the town to identify places for property owners who have found there to be some inconsistencies or things that don't make sense to them, and let us know about it. Like why, and we had somebody who wanted to potentially join the planning commission who brought one of those to my attention. I forget the name of the road she lives off of, but I think up in the northwest part of town, away from River Road, there's some areas where the zoning lines follow road right-of-ways.
This is Meg?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, she said, well, why is it this way? And I said, I don't know why it was drawn this way. I can't defend it. And this might be something that we want to look at changing. but we're not ready yet to tackle that. So
Yeah.
I think if we put out a call to the whole town and said, do you have any things on your property, any places where you feel like, the way that the zoning district lines are drawn prevent you from doing something that you think is 100% common sense and should be allowed?
Well, before we do that, I think we ought to look at the issues and maybe come up with some ideas, basically, which I'm going to be doing that basically before we get into March, and maybe have some ideas.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it feels good that by like April, we'll start to move into a more full discussion of that.
We'll talk to Brad and so on to
Yeah.
Yeah.
look the whole thing over and just see how we're transposing things there, making this,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, let's use the big printer. That'll be a fun day. But does anyone else have anything else that's missing? And again, it's just, the next 3 months of meetings. And of course, there'll be more things, we're going to get into the mapping issues, and short-term rentals is something else that we talked about adding as we get into those warmer months. But does this feel good to everybody with what we have laid out through March?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Some time ago, we did ask the select board about requiring a registration of the Airbnb situation. Do you know if there's any feedback on that from them?
I haven't heard anything since we talked about it. But we can certainly bring it up again. And just to recap, I think when we last talked about it in the report that I put together, the step one was to prepare kind of basically a registration requirement ordinance. And that would be for the select board to debate and adopt. Because unless we have registration, we don't have any way of knowing how many there are and where they are. And we don't have a basis to regulate them. So I think my understanding is that the select board is fine with us doing that homework and giving them something to consider. And then it'll be up to them to decide what to do with it. I did do that in my last full-time role in Charlotte at the request of the select board, and prepared this report. And there was one member of the select board who had an Airbnb, and she did not want to talk about the ordinance. It basically died for a lack of a second. She was adamant about that. She didn't want the town to get into
Should
that.
she not have recused herself?
You think?
Seems like a time for that.
So should we put that down as one of the things here?
Yeah,
Yeah, into April.
we could add that for April.
Yeah.
But otherwise too, I think if everyone feels good with that, I don't think we need a motion to move with that.
I just wanted us to be aware that,
Here's
it's
kind of
helpful
the
to have a schedule, a work plan,
Yeah.
because it gives my work structure between meetings.
Yeah.
Because it helps me focus on, okay, if we're going to be talking about multifamily homes via conditional use review in the rural residential district on March 19th, then I better be working on that by early March. Because, some of these things require a fair amount of research and drafting before I can bring it to this body for discussion. And I don't want to be unprepared. And I know you don't want to be unprepared.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
Glad to have you working on this.
yeah.
We never think you're unprepared, Larry.
Yeah, with that too, we could move to these items and propose changes to the ULURs that you are very much prepared for, about change or further changes to accessory structure use and home industry. Does anyone else want a hard copy of this one? Yeah,
Need one, Art?
you guys are good, you good?
I'll take
Yeah, so when we last talked about this, what I heard was essentially a thumbs up, but please go back and look at the work that the commission has already done in the past. And
So I missed something.
yeah, so that's what I did. I didn't change the accessory structure one very much. I did change the home occupation and home industry standards a bit. There's a bunch of new stuff in that, especially on page 2 now.
Didn't this just go, this already went, didn't it? Or is this something new?
This is new.
Oh, so this is beyond what we sent to.
Right.
to select
This
board.
has not been warned.
Okay.
But we did
There's
discuss this.
We did talk about it.
And the yellow portion there that is being deleted, I assume,
Yes.
we had agreed to include after customary and subordinate, but not necessarily in size. We like the word subordinate, but not necessarily in size.
Yeah,
We did, we
I don't
agreed
like
to
the
do
word.
that.
I don't like the word subordinate.
No.
I think it's
yeah,
just,
I didn't
Well, that's
it's
either.
not very clear. I think it should be gone.
Yeah, I mean.
What does it mean?
Especially in a rural community, it's very typical
Yeah.
for outbuildings like barns
Yeah.
to be much bigger than the houses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, it seems like subordinate kind of derails what we're trying to accomplish here, which is definitional clarity. And so I actually spent a lot of time on like online dictionaries trying to, and the thesaurus, trying to like come up with similar terms and which was the more precise one that captured what it is that we're trying to say here in defining an accessory
more hobby
structure. Yeah, I guess it's cool.
Words are fun.
It's kind of a limbo, I guess.
So, you know, for me, I thought incidental, you know, is what we have. And customary, I think it's easy, we'll keep that. But I think what I was looked for and what I'm proposing here is supplementary because, you know, a barn that's bigger than a house is not incidental necessarily. You know, back in the days when farming was a predominant use on the land, the barn was largely the point that people lived in the house who farmed, but you know, the barn was where a lot of the action was for the family and for the property. So incidental really is not, doesn't get there. But supplementary, yes, and customary, yes. So I think that's more clear, and I think it's good to sort of dispense of size comparisons altogether, because subordinate is just, that clearly implies that whatever the structure other than the primary dwelling is, that it's smaller than the primary dwelling. And in many places, it's just not smaller, it's bigger.
Yeah, what if you have like a car collector that wants like a big, you know, airplane hangar size building to
Yeah.
store his 5 or 6 cars or whatever? I don't know, does that fall in line with this then, or if you say if it's supplemental to, like it's kind of like home living, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in-ground pools are typically not that big, but ponds can be huge.
Yeah.
You know, people can have multiple garage structures and a barn.
Even greenhouses now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah, supplemental is a good word.
Yeah, no, I like that better.
Yeah. Customary, I don't know what that really would be. You know, that doesn't seem to say anything to me.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
subjective, I think.
That threw me a little too. I'm not sure what it means.
Was it like it's not like a pre-manufactured plot thing, like
That's not what I was going for. I was going for customary to be, basically typical would be a synonym for that. So, you know, these are, and the definition calls out some examples.
Right.
But these are not exclusive, right? So, you know, like you say, there's a car collector who has just a big building to store his car collection, or, you know, it could be the greenhouse, you know, somebody who's starting a little home industry for plant flower starts or vegetable starts. You know, I think that's customary. It's a customary use in town.
But customary actually brings up questions immediately with a whole bunch of us around the table.
Does it?
It did, 1, 2, 3.
Just
Yeah.
4.
Once you said typical.
So let's put in.
Yeah, right.
Let's put in supplemental. I think supplemental is a
Yeah.
good word.
Would typical be better than customary?
No, I wouldn't even have a term in there that the neighbor could misinterpret and, you know, oppose the permit.
Yep.
Over it, because that's what I think we're trying to avoid. So,
Okay.
I mean, I'm more of a fewer words to the point type person, but that's.
Supplemental.
With some expletives in there too.
Yeah, supplemental.
Supplementary might do it all. Or Tim, what
Was it customary is more like fitting within the neighborhood, which you're trying to get rid of as well?
I was thinking about that. I was thinking about, you know, as long as uses were things that people were accustomed to seeing, in a neighborhood setting. I mean, if somebody wanted to put up an outbuilding with a small nuclear power plant, that would not be customary.
I was gonna say, what if somebody wanted like a 365 haunted house, like display?
Yeah.
Well, I have one for you because
Yeah.
I have an in-ground pool
Mhm.
and I want to turn it into a subterranean greenhouse.
Ooh.
It's, I mean, that kind of fits into this where it might be not customary.
Yes.
Right. That's like, yeah, there may be other examples of,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people are gonna have all kinds of innovative things that they want to do with their outbuildings.
yeah.
And I hate to discourage that if they're things that are benign to neighbors and to the neighborhood.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
You know, and so I think these examples that we have in the definition are fine. But, you know, I wouldn't want to try to say that we're going to list all the possible examples, because then there'd be, you know, 25 properties in town that have outbuildings that have activities in them that don't fit the examples. So, you know, I think having examples is good because it's more informative, but it shouldn't be exclusive of things that people can do and will do on their property that are not in any way harmful or annoying to neighbors, that require a structure to house them.
Incidental also just suggests that it's temporary.
Mhm.
Oh, that's a good,
So
interesting.
I think
Yeah.
supplementary
That's what
is
we're
the
doing.
word, I think.
Okay,
We're getting rid of incidental too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's out.
But maybe we want, yeah, maybe supplementary does it all.
Supplemental.
Yeah.
And
That's
the,
good.
and the list of examples
Mhm.
helps, but
Yeah.
it could, my only other thought is that maybe there's, et cetera, maybe covers it, but, and others.
You look at it from the other way,
Or-
what can you not do?
Right. The nuclear
That's
power
the one I
plant.
Well, I think that performance standards are a good acid test of those kinds of things. So if it's really loud, consistently loud, if it's throws off a lot of light spillage, if it creates smoke and smells, if it creates excessive vibration, I mean, all those things are called out in the performance standards. So the performance standards, again, don't try to name every possible example of what could create those kinds of conditions, but it draws a clear line, like you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. And provides a basis for enforcing a zoning violation. And I think that gets at it.
If you want to build like a huge indoor pickleball court that was 20,000 square feet, it was pink on the outside.
So you know what Tim wants to do.
Pickleball is hot right now.
It's only covered 10% of your lot though.
Right.
Big lot.
1 acre. In 10 acres.
Yeah, well, that example would require site plan review,
Mhm.
you know, because it's a commercial use, unless people are coming to
Just
free.
friends.
Just friends. You know, yeah, any commercial use requires parking, access, septic accommodation, lighting plan, runoff plan, all that other stuff. But yeah, if it was big and that 20,000 square feet pink building, I don't think we have any standards that relate to offensive color schemes. I'm not aware of any, but they could be there.
But it is, but yeah, this is meant to cover items though that wouldn't otherwise fall under
Yeah.
that more extensive review.
Yes. Okay, so crossing off and customary.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, does everyone feel good with that? If it's just reads as a structure or use that is clearly supplementary to the principal structure or use of land on the same lot. Examples.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Works for me.
Larry, does that feel
Yeah.
right?
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so on to the next one, home occupations and home industry. So originally, this was titled just home industry standards because I was focused on that part of section 411. But I realized when I looked at the text that had been marked up through earlier work of the planning commission that it also looked at home occupations, made a couple of changes there. So the list of changes that starts near the top of page 2 here includes 411C, two changes there that relate to home occupations. And then it picks up two things that we already talked about for home industry, and adds a new 1, 2, 3,
The pages are.
third thing.
I'm gonna ask a crazy question. So based on how we have these zoned, can this relate to how you write these off tax-wise as well? I know it might be totally off the cuff, but I'm just thinking about how I work from home.
Yep.
So these are the things I think of. I was just in the Midwest and I was talking to a farmer there, and they get to write off the food for their pets that catch mice. I know. So I'm always like, now I'm thinking, oh, if I have my home office, what does that look like? And does this justify me writing off certain areas based on how my home is zoned?
Yes. Yeah, this is really more, home industry and home occupations are regulations of use of a property. And I think if, well, basically, bigger picture, what you submit for your taxes and what you think qualifies for business tax write-off
Right,
on your own property is between you and the IRS.
got it.
The town will not get involved.
But I'm just thinking if you justify it by
Yes.
how things are zoned.
I don't think
And-
it needs to get that deep with the IRS. I think you just
Yeah,
spelling out that you use whatever 30% of your house, you know,
for your
So
business.
you write it off,
for to support your work.
Yeah.
When in doubt, write it off.
right.
Yeah,
You got
Yeah.
a paper trail.
That was my
yeah. I mean, if you,
rule.
and just to use the example in here, so, you know, if somebody started a print shop in their barn, and it started off really small, it's just one guy and maybe a helper part-time, then that's a home occupation. But at the point at which he hires more than two people, then it requires a permit for a home industry, because the business has grown to the point where between additional people driving to the property, additional truck traffic for deliveries and pickups, and additional people working on site.
Even if those two people already live in a home?
Well, I'm just telling you, this is the regulatory basis. Home occupation is a light touch.
Got it. I hear.
Home industry requires a permit, so it's a step up.
Yeah.
And it's designed to accommodate entrepreneurs who want to start businesses in their homes. And then because of their success, they may start to have, their business may start to have impacts on their neighbors. And so you want to give them an avenue to get a permit that recognizes, and this goes to your question about taxes,
Yeah.
that recognizes that the use has changed, their intensity of the use has ramped up. And therefore, it requires a review by the town. And assuming that it all goes well and they get their permit for home industry from the town, you can certainly have that to stop your tax claims to the IRS.
I would think you'd almost want it. I mean, I'm no insurance guru, but I would think at some level, at some point, you'd want to have that permit, because I would assume insurance, if something happens,
Yeah.
and you know, like you have a piece of equipment like a printer and it like burns down the house, and the insurance is like, well, we didn't know this was like a home industry, so we're not insuring that, you know.
It does say the way it's written there now, if you're a resident of the dwelling, that's different than non-resident
Right.
employees.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm just thinking, my son is an autistic person, and I do want to build out a home industry that he can move forward with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that there are probably more people like me around here that are similar to
Mhm.
that.
Yes.
So I guess once he's 18, he can technically live off premises, not saying that he has to, but then like he kind of counts as that like potential off.
That's
Premises
kind of what
person.
I'm asking. Is he an off-premise, even though he probably will always live with me? Yeah.
Well,
The
that's the thing.
IRS depends on a lot of honesty from people, basically
Yeah.
just saying that, you know, this is what it is.
Yeah, it
basically.
does.
Okay, yeah.
Right. So just to get to the changes that I made, the first
Yeah,
two
that's part of
things,
what it
411C for home occupations, those came out of the previous work. So
Yeah,
that you can't have more than half of your home, up to a maximum of 1,000 square feet of the primary residence to conduct the home occupation, because then it starts to feel more like industry. You know, if it requires a lot of equipment and a lot of space. And then the permit thing, so this 411C, subsection 11 was about, I gather, that if the ownership of the property were to change hands, like somebody sells a home that housed a home occupation, they don't necessarily, the new owner doesn't necessarily have to pick up and operate that home occupation right away. They have essentially a 5-year grace period in order to restart the home occupation business. But the permit will not, the permit remains valid while they're figuring out if they want to keep doing that business. And if they haven't restarted the business within 5 years of selling of buying the house from the former owner, then the permit becomes void and they have to reapply. I hadn't thought about that, but there it is. And then the home industry stuff, similar to what we had before, and the addition is, again, it's more of a safety valve. So let's say Pete's print shop in the barn becomes really successful. It's like becomes a go-to printing shop for all of Cambridge and Underhill. Well, at some point, you know, Pete wants to increase employees from 5 to 7 to 9. Does that really require any action by the town? And so the previous work suggested that, yeah, if you're going to change the production level, ramp up the production, ramp up employees working on sites over 5 people, that then triggers a requirement for a new conditional use permit. Because again, it's a situation where, you know, when a business starts to grow rapidly, if it's based in someone's home or in a barn attached to the home or whatever, you know, if it's way out in the woods, it might not have an impact. But if people are living 50 feet away, it might very well have a neighborhood impact. And it's not saying the town wouldn't allow that. It's just saying they have to come in and apply for a new permit for the larger business. And, you know, part of that discussion about conditional use review is going to be, you know, site plan considerations. Like if you had parking for 3 cars on site and suddenly you've got 7 employees, probably your 3 spots are not going to be enough anymore. And, you know, it's ditto for the septic accommodations for the business. Because
So that's the thing, you guys, I mean, I know we don't have like a building inspection or building code enforcement, whatever. So like, you get to that point, like there's probably an occupancy change. There's probably like, you need maps for like fire escapes, fire extinguishers, signage, things like that. Like, I would assume a conditional use permit would be at least a safety valve for that, like to at least raise those questions to DRB to be like, hey, you should consider these things. So like people aren't being, you know, working in an unsafe environment.
yes.
I have a question is backing up to C.
Okay.
So how's it been in if you have a non-permitted use, grandfather use, is that end after, if you have a grace period, if it's something that's been in existence, a business that was never permitted?
If it predates the zoning regulations, yes. I mean, if someone, I'll use a crude example. So if someone has been doing blacksmithing work in their barn for 40 years, you know, that predates the zoning regulations. And so, yes, all existing uses that are non-conforming are grandfathered in. You know, there does come a point where, you know, if a neighbor complains, then, you know, and it comes to the zoning administrator's attention where they might want to go and do a site inspection. And if the long-established grandfather use is something that doesn't otherwise fit the regulations, then they would probably ask the owner to come in and, you know, to review what's going on there. And if there is new stuff going on that implicates the regulations, then they might encourage the business owner to ask for a permit. But, you know, if it's someone who's just working quietly in their own home, if it's an accountant who's working from home or somebody who's cutting hair, you know, in their sunroom extension, and it hasn't really changed, it's unlikely to trigger that kind of scrutiny.
Even if you sell the property, does it still grandfather through to the next seller if there's a business there?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, existing uses are grandfathered as long as they're otherwise compliant with the regulations. And that's an important caveat. And I think it was your point, the zoning administrator can't possibly know about everything unless it's called out, by a neighbor, or, if the property owner himself or herself comes to ask about it, hey, I just bought this property, and, the previous owner was cutting hair in a studio, and she has this whole customer base that she's offered to hand it over to me and sold me all the equipment when I bought the house, can I just keep doing this? And then there's a conversation with the zoning administrator, and usually it's pretty benign. But if somebody wants to go from cutting hair by appointment to running a beautician school, well, that's a change in use, and it should be like that. Yeah, and then I didn't realize that there was this chart in here, so we took another look at that, and the table 4.2 does actually summarize some of the rules that are different between home occupation and home industry. So I just put some quick updates in there. That's it.
Yeah, what was the thinking, or why is it under home industry, this single family dwelling versus dwelling?
I feel like dwelling is a more inclusive term. I feel like single family dwelling is kind of very 20th century, because families are so diverse now, households are so diverse, and so I think dwelling is descriptive of all kinds of occupancy regimes, and doesn't sound like it excludes unmarried couples living together, or houses of students living together, or multi-generational households. Yeah, exactly.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, I always assumed single family was just like a single unit, not like a duplex or, multiplex
Right.
as well. Like you can have maybe a duplex where the one half is a home occupation,
Right.
the other half is not.
Yeah.
I guess that's maybe why they put it that way back when this was written, but
Yeah, and you may have noticed that as we talk about other provisions that use the word dwelling, that have studiously steered us away from single-family dwelling terminology, and sometimes I use single-unit dwelling. And to Jeff's point, in this set of rules about home occupations and home industry, it doesn't really matter whether it's a single-unit dwelling or a multi-family dwelling. What matters is that there is a business being conducted in one of the units, and that these are the rules for that activity.
And then, or one other thing I just noticed too is that you've got the 411D4, that character, that you changed that in the home industry standard, but not in the home occupation.
Okay.
Maybe we want to do that on both. I know it's like similar to what you're saying about the single family, that we're kind of trying to steer away from that subjective character of the neighborhood language. Which is, I think, many of us want to preserve the rural character still, but I don't know, does anyone have an issue with adjusting that the way he's done for home industry, for home occupation?
Sounds good.
Good point.
Okay.
And then I think it's great to make these changes too about, if Pete ends up moving down the road and his shop stays there, that it can remain.
You can keep
And that,
still run it.
yeah, that's a crucial part that we didn't discuss as closely as some of the others, but I think that's really great. I think that's good. I mean, maybe is this one that we want to look,
Move along.
do edits again, or do you think we could move this along with those edits and push this?
Shouldn't ask me, it's a question for the group.
I feel good about
Does
it.
everyone?
That's good.
Yeah. Then, does anyone want to make a motion that we approve these proposed amendments to the land use regulations as laid out by Larry in this document, and with the additions that we've discussed tonight?
Sure, I'll make that up.
David, anyone second? Tim will second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Great. Okay, cool. Those are good ones. And that's great. And then we caught back up. We're doing great. On timing. I think that brings us just to approving the meeting minutes from last night, right? I didn't see anything.
On January 7th.
From January 7th. I did take a look at them. Does anyone have changes to the January 7th meeting minutes?
Do not.
No? Then I'll make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from January 7th, 2026 as presented. Is there a second? Art will second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Okay, great. The meeting minutes from January 7th are approved. And I think that's it for tonight, and there's nothing left to do except make maybe the
Motion to adjourn.
Dave moves that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Roy second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None.
And ended early?
I thought, yeah, we were behind, but now.
I think I was running, man.
It was a little bit nerve-wracking, but I thought we might have a slower time getting through those amendments, but I think we covered it. And yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah, that was great.